What's the most bread you've ever lost in a buttered bread toss? Butter side up, the ill will recover, and the
Mhm,
stolen good will be returned.
mhm.
Buttered side down, it will rain torrentially.
Thank you, Javier Bardem, for this riveting performance of No Country for Old Men Who Aren't like celiac. I just
Why is it called No Country for Old Men when there's only one old man named
you
Anton,
know,
played by Javier Bardem?
I actually have never seen that movie.
I've also never seen that movie.
I think we might have exposed ourselves. Yeah, I just and everything I know about it is completely out of context. So like I know the coin flip scene and I know he has a really horrible haircut.
I'm the one doing bread psychological games here.
Yeah. Well, he could be Serbian about it and put the coin in the bread.
It's true.
hmm Missed opportunity right there.
Mhm. Yeah, very true.
This is so stupid. Like, I don't know how we got here as the cold open. Like, what even? Why are we talking about this?
You, we flipped a coin.
Oh,
Who decided the cold open,
that's true.
and
I
we
lost.
decided that what's the most you've ever lost in a coin, a butter bread toss. Don't lose the damn coin.
I no, I have been telling people from the dawn of time, if you get invited to Badnje Večer, if you're going to Serbian Christmas Eve, and we're doing the chest set with the coin, and we're passing the bread around and we're doing our little ritual, and then we take turns pulling it apart. Um, if you win the coin that's inside, do not lose it. It is literally a magical money-making, fortune-drawing emblem for the rest of the year. My great grandmother would always somehow we assumed she would like fix it because it was always the newest guest that would win. It wouldn't be like somebody who's always there for Christmas. But we don't know how she did it because it's not like she 100% knew. But then that started happening in my family where now like the newest guest does win. Like this year it was you and a mutual friend of ours who came over and who won. And also the first time Salt played it, he won too. But don't lose it, guys.
Be not alarmed at the frightful house, which you may flip.
No. This episode is about how the two we haven't seen No Country for Old Men. I need to ask Salt if he's seen it. Um
we've we've traveled for it's we've been traveling for the years that we have been alive to get here, and now we're here, and the bread is either buttered side up or buttered side down, and you have to say, call it.
Wait, is the only thing that you've seen the coin flip scene, like in the gas station?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Usually with like some kind of Giga Chad, like lo-fi playing in the background when I'm scrolling at 3 in the morning.
hmm
Like just the whatever's happening in the scene. I don't know. Just
Well, Yeah, no, I agree. This is very much your like beats to like study to, like chill and relax to, or whatever. It's either like one of the Ryan Gosling incarnations that we decided that we are. We already explained who out of the three of us, which one of us is which Ryan Gosling. And you're the drive Ryan Gosling with the scorpion jacket, so that definitely fits.
Mhm.
Which would be, I personally think that would make for a great talismanic implement, right? Like making some kind of Mars and Scorpio election with the drive jacket.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Hmm.
Just do the whole martial pentacle consecration of the scorpion.
The fat scorp.
Mhm.
They make him kind of chunky though. That's a big scorpion.
It's true. I think he's been eating a lot of bread.
Oh God.
Oh man.
I do prefer this to the Jeff Goldblum, the Carcist, doing the Grimorium Verum impression. That ended up like haunting, and much to my chagrin, because I didn't enjoy it. I was downvoting that one, but that was haunting. Episode 54 of the podcast. I really didn't enjoy Jeff Goldblum, the Carcist. This one, I think, what's his name? Anton Chigurh, or whoever Javier Bardem was playing, the guy with the bowl cut. I think this one I prefer.
Yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah.
I I'm just thinking back, like I'm looking at the dialogue from that scene transcribed onto Genius of all things, and
Oh,
just
that.
remembering the ending of it going, "Don't put it in your pocket."
Well, no.
It's
Well, you know what? I agree, on some level, but also like that is a great talisman.
true. It's very
That
true. He even
is,
goes on like the talisman rant. He's like,
yeah.
it'll become just a coin if you put it with the other coins. It's your lucky coin.
And he's so honestly slay bestie. Um,
So right for that one. And speaking of lucky coins and giving them to us, remember to check us out at patreon.com/slash the
you
frightful house.
didn't introduce us. Who are we? Who are these voices?
Be not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. It's Sfinga.
I pray to God that he is merciful every day and that my bread is buttered.
And breaking bread key.
I think I think if you want to break bread with us, you can join us on our Discord at patreon.com/, the frightful howls.
It's very true. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and just for our patrons. We have a Discord server, as you mentioned, where you can choose budget side up or budget side down.
You can get Key to join the voice call server, and we can just keep doing that over and over again. Actually, that wasn't that a thing that happened when you were doing the Seder square testing, where you were like you would I remember you were losing it a little bit, but you were like, I'm gonna just make a bunch of identical squares of parchment that I'm gonna keep drawing. Some of them will be, test samples and with nothing on them, and some of them will have the Seder squares that I'm gonna test to see which ones burn. Like, like you did document that very much for us, so we can
Mhm.
perhaps continue to document some bread magic.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, there is the Kitchen Witchin channel where you can share all of your bread recipes.
That's true.
Let's get Casper back on this one.
Yeah, yeah. Also, Salt has like all the best soda bread recipes.
Mhm.
Um,
And in addition to soda bread recipes, he has a fantastic almanac, which you can get
yeah.
by joining us on patreon.com/, the Primal House. We
This
also
one's
have,
just for the people who complain that the intros are long.
it's true.
We stretched them like we stretched the dough.
It's very true. You can choose long or short. You can flip a bread, determine if the intro be long or short through delicious glutinous augury.
They are generally quite short. It's people just forget there's a cold open, so it doesn't actually start. And then if we drag it out, we drag it out, and so what?
What are you gonna do about it? Bake bread about it?
That's so stupid.
My name is Javier Bardem.
My, my, my name is No Country. Um,
My name is Old Man. Um, and if you want to hear some analysis about No Country for Old Men, we have a monthly live occult book club where you can also suggest films, and we
yes,
will discuss a text or film of your choosing.
we just did Sinners, 2025. Amazing, amazing movie.
Very true.
Um, mhm. You're allowed to suggest Cormac McCarthy novels. Like nothing is it's an occult book club, but nothing's stopping you from suggesting any Cormac McCarthy novel.
It's true.
Hmm
And much like our discussion of the road, uh, we can take some get some marginalia collected
hmm
because we have show notes for every episode. We have a whole tier for monthly group spell work, one of which has included a photo of slices of bread.
That's true. It actually did.
It did.
It did. It was salt and it was beautiful.
Mhm. And you can get that bread increased from the three of us on your behalf. And speaking of increasing bread, remember to give us a like, rating, and review on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever it is you might be listening to us. It helps us fight the glutinous demiurge of the algorithm.
Hmm
Check out our services. I offer bread readings. Red augury. I offer personalized coaching in magic and mediumship, sorcery for hire, readings, and custom talismans, oils, and tools. Sfinga offers Balkan Favamancy readings. Go book with her; she is the best.
Thank you, thank you.
And Salt's books are closed, but you can keep an eye out for his monthly astrological almanac on the Patreon. Last but not least, hit us up on social media. Sfinga is at Dragon Cunning. Salt is at Salt C and C. That's letters CANDC. And I am at Barn Owl dot bread. No, Barnowl dot key.
We've been requested many times to do bright magic, which is a little intimidating because this is like genuinely it could be several theses. Not sometimes we say, oh, this could be like a dissertation. This could be several dissertations. Um, because what a staple, what a symbol of sustenance, of hope, of joy, of celebration, of health, money. What a kind of a deeply important grain across the board, and something that, is literally in the Our Father. We literally asked to give us this day our daily bread. And also, what a fundamental part of magic and food culture and ritual across the board. So to even tackle like bread and magic specifically, and no, we're saying bread, not necessarily grains, not necessarily like because I was just teaching. I had a client today that I was telling them about a oral charm in Serbian for spreading millet. And it's Alice Prosose, which is Elisha, like the successor to the prophet Elijah. So millet, basically, is what you're saying. And as you're spreading it out with your hand, you can use this in many different ways. One of which is to curry favor with land spirits for sure. Another which is to entice spirits to show you the locations of hagstones. As you're walking along, like a beach, for example, and dropping millet on the floor so that you're able to entice spirits to reveal to you where hagstones are. But also this is done to essentially just ask for fertility, ask for fecundity, ask for wealth. You're saying, you're sowing, but you're hoping to reap, right? And so there's so much that we can say on the agricultural tides of these things and harvest festivals. And I'm sure one day we'll do like an episode for each of like the major seasons, right? We already started one with like seasons and sorcery, and we covered mostly spring and summer. An autumn and winter one is absolutely due, which we should get to in like the next couple months or so on as the time actually arrives. But like really, we're gonna focus on bread, and this by nature cannot be comprehensive, not certainly in a podcast episode. But we're gonna try and touch on aspects of bread, sorcery, and magic as a way to give inspiration, give some like food for thought, quite literally, for how you can incorporate more and more like this kind of magic into your life if you don't already, and also just inspire. I mean, and again, this is going to be limited to. I want to focus a little bit on just like what are our traditions as well as like interesting historical sources and make this as practical as possible. But we will touch on history and we will touch certainly on, I think, some very notable, like outstanding historical examples while also then getting into like what do we do in our day to day.
Absolutely, yeah. I think like you mentioned, this is one of the primary vehicles and tools by which magic has and can be done, and is so, just deeply emblematic of pretty much everything that we enchant for on a regular basis.
Hmm.
Be it, the one blessing that secures all others, health, is primarily, as we'll come to see, can be secured through bread and its manipulation, but also, increase, money, like you said, fertility, successful harvest, et cetera, et cetera. So, possibly the most versatile um, tool of magic. And
Hmm.
it sounds kind of funny to phrase like a food as a tool, but really like this is
But it
the
is, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like it's the
Mm.
springboard by which you can launch so many other things, and it's manipulation, each part of it, like using the loaf itself as a microcosmic view of the entire ritual year and agrarian cycle in which so many of these techniques and traditions arose and developed and continued to innovate.
Well, looking into some of the research for this episode, one of the things that I immediately went to was the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts. Specifically, I was looking at the translation by James P. Allen. One of our mutual, all three of our really mutual closest friends, is a trained Egyptologist, and she, in talking to her a lot, especially, and I wish Salt was on for this episode so we could like kind of nerd out about the Egyptian stuff, but like this was really, he has to go bake that bread and also get that bread.
We must accept horse's eye. We
He
must.
lost it in a coin flip. No,
What's the most you've ever lost in a coin flip?
it's like you can't.
Upper Egypt.
Yeah. It's so stupid. I love it. I was looking
Lower
into.
Egypt.
Yeah, no, it would never catch me losing Lower Egypt. Never. Well, I mean, first of all, like so much of again Egyptian magic is also bread based, and bread and beer are the fundamental building blocks of both Mesopotamian and Egyptian juju in general. But like if you look through the pyramid texts, and if you look at how many times is bread mentioned, it's like 191 like times just on the PDF search, and maybe some of that isn't the citations, but like it's a lot. Like if you just scroll through it, um it refers to like the bread of your father is not for you, you whose attack has missed. Your own bread of your father is for you, you whose attack has missed. Like I love that as a kind of taunt. You can go into like all the different things of like offering loaves of bread, the little shopty guys. Our tata, our godfather and Kimba, Jesse Hathaway and both of us have like extensively chatted about like we need to bring Shopties back. Like the little miniature servants, like clay
Mhm.
servants that like attend to your shrines for you. Like put it on like a timer where like at sun up, noon, sundown, midnight, like this little guy is coming out in front of your icons, in front of your statues, bows, little like clay vessel of beer, bows again, little loaf of bread. Like done. Because that's what they're, if the priest missed the offering, like the shopkeep will take care of it, which I love. But there's a lot of offering rituals throughout these texts, which includes like an offering of a fresh loaf of bread, an offering of another loaf of bread, an offering of a kidney, an offering of a porridge loaf, an offering of a metal bowl of beer, a blackened bowl of beer, a fresh baked loaf, another offering bread, a loaf of trampled bread, an oaf of pulled bread. There's a great section which is preparing the offering table actually, where you're basically like stitching Osiris back together. Like, for example, Osiris Unus except Horus's eye prevents him from trampling it, and you give him a loaf of trampled bread. Osiris Unus except Horus's eye, which he has pulled out, and you give him a bowl of pulled bread. Like it's stretched. And then later on, it's like, you lift it to his face and you add another bowl of bread, which is again just it's the fecundity of the body resurrecting, right? And you ask him, receive this with your bread, which is Horus's eye. So the bread becomes a substitute for Horus's eye. There's a whole section on bread and onions, which again, more trampled bread, more pulled bread, more bread that is made with beer, different kinds of breads, which maybe not, made of different kinds of grains, truncated breads, loaves, ones that come with onions, for example. And all of this has to do with, put this in your mouth, put this thing that he pulled out. I've set upon your eye. I've carried us off, and so on and so forth. And it just goes into like resurrecting a deity's body using primarily bread. And I love that. I think it's such a beautiful memory as well of the why bread is so powerful. But it becomes like much like rice and other staple grains. You have something small, then it becomes something large. And I think about this all the time with the Catholic Orthodox debate over leavened or unleavened bread in the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
Because this isn't just about baking, it's about disagreements over tradition and theology and authority for sure. But I think it's fascinating because I didn't like as a kid because I grew up Orthodox. I didn't even know that like unleavened bread was like a thing that was used in ritual. Like to me, I remember my first memory of taking Eucharist, and it's an actual bread, of which the center is made into the Eucharist. The rest becomes blessed bread, which you can take home with you. You can give it to non-baptized people. You can actually we use that a lot in magic, obviously, if we're folk practitioners. But like it's that central core that gets fully consecrated into the Eucharist. And then it's so often depending on the church, but like at least where I grew up, it was dipped into the wine and it would be given to you. And so when it comes out of the wine, it is bloody and it looks like flesh. And
Mm-hmm.
that, I think there's what is the central ritual of Christianity, right? It's the Eucharist. And bread becoming the body of Christ, or in this case, bread becoming the body of Osiris as it's being reconstructed. This is it's a divine implement, right? It is the grain that is milled, that is turned, that feeds nations, right? It is something that can keep you full and going for when you have nothing else. And it's why are just so many both like protest slogans across histories is all about like we must have bread, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is
Yeah, abs
interesting about the whole unleavened versus leavened thing because I was like that bamboozled me. And yet both sides make complete sense, right? So for those who don't know, on the Catholic side of things, um, because at Last Supper Jesus was celebrating Passover, and Passover meals are made with unleavened bread, that became obviously one part of the inheritance. But also, the unleavened bread can emphasize purity and sinlessness, especially because this is a sacrifice ritual. You are sacrificing bread, you're making an offering of it with the wine, and it's our memory of Christ's sacrifice. So that's one aspect of it too, right? And however, on the Orthodox side, the use of leavened bread is really because the understanding that after the resurrection, the old leaven is of sin is gone, right? Like the kind of yeast of sin, which just a little bit lets it rise and agglutinate in the body. The idea being that like, okay, that is gone, right? Because now it's actually Christ's presence that is rising, that is living, that is full, and now instead of this notion of yeast or leaven, right? Being this kind of like capacity for just a little bit of sin goes a long way and corrupts the whole body as it rises. It's actually now a symbol of new life and resurrection. So it's more appropriate to be seen as a representation of a Christian mystery as opposed to like the idea of an old covenant. And so really, like you can like quote unquote like if you're who's right. I mean, it doesn't. We're not debating theology here, but like I think this is quite literally one of those cases where like I can see both sides because like they're just putting a different emphasis. Is it the capacity to rise a symbol of the sin rising, and also just an emphasis on older tradition, and also like the thinness of it is purity and sinlessness, or is it actually the opposite?
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think like, even just the first point of like, the very blatant theological, the this is my body, eat of it, of
Yeah.
the bread versus the bread can essentially just be a body for anything, like a basic
There,
unit of
yeah.
sustenance, but also just, as something that is like, okay, cool.
hmm There is so much beef about this. This is pretty much settled by the 11th century, in terms of
Mhm.
like when for sure like this division was set in stone. Like now today, the churches do recognize each other's Eucharist as valid, um, but it's pretty much universal that Catholics use unleavened hosts. Although some Eastern Catholic rites use leavened bread, but
Mhm.
Orthodox traditionally, like pretty much across the board, use leavened bread. And really, like, it's funny. There was a lot of like insults back and forth around this too. Like, I remember reading a little bit about this when I was researching, and it was just like Patriarch Michael Cerularius forbade people in like the 11th century from taking communion with the Latins by saying their Eucharist was invalid because it was unleavened bread, and he called it lifeless bread, like unworthy of the mystery of Christ because it was so
Mhm.
flat. None of those little crackers, right? Although that wasn't crackers back then. But meanwhile, like the Latins were like, no, these Byzantines, they're like bread worshippers because they're so much more obsessed with bread. They're all about the bread as opposed to Christ's words. They're
Mhm.
distorting true traditions and or offering polluted sacrifices, which just it's funny. Like it's basically like, do you bake it with yeast or not? Like depends entirely on, I mean, there's many
Yeah.
more differences than that, but like it's big enough that it was worth debating. And so, now both the Orthodox in me in general, as well as just kind of like the training that I have, has always placed an emphasis on its capacity to rise. And a little bit of bread, will go into any charm I make for any saint because a key ingredient will be bread baked for their feast. What makes it the bread of that particular saint? It's that it was made on their day. The day itself is the election, and that's what matters. That said, though, bread debates were not only between Christians, but also between pagans and Christians as well, which comes up in a few different interesting places. I want to draw people's attention to Andrea Marashi and Francesca Tasca. I hope I'm pronouncing those names correctly. Although I often like listen, my capacity to pronounce and mispronounce things is all across the board, which is really funny because I feel like when you speak like five languages, like it just blurs, and then it's like, what's an accent? Like,
Mhm.
what's a stress on a syllable? Like I don't often speak with my Serbian accent when I'm speaking out loud, but then like that pronunciation will creep up, and then randomly it will get swallowed by a completely new set of pronunciations. Um, Even
Mhm.
within English, like. I don't know. I thought about that earlier because I became very conscious that I was like, oh, there, like that's not a consistent pronunciation at all. But like for English even, but like whatever, it is what it is. Not all of us can have your dulcet Midwestern tones.
Not everyone can be be Javier Bardem.
It's just we can't, and it's tragic, but it's so true. At least we don't have
Oh
that
man.
haircut.
Flip the hair. What's the most you've ever lost in a haircut?
Too much, too much. If you've ever been on my in my horrible Instagram stories where I post like once a month, that's like I post a photo of like a horse
Yeah.
with bangs. You know what that means. It
Mhm.
means that I overdid it.
Even the distinction of how unleavened is unleavened.
Yeah.
And especially in contemporary Judaism, like the very strict requirements because there's yeast in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. It's a contagion.
Mhm.
It's fascinating. But
Much like
yeah,
magic.
Much like magic, is so true. But yeah, Marashi and Tasca's book, Food, Heresies, and Magical Boundaries in the Middle Ages, is excellent, and it contains a lot of really important studies on just like what are these debates around food and proper religiosity, this relationship between licit and illicit acts of ritual power within the Middle Ages. Early on in their book, they talk a lot about like different debates around bread, and I wanted to share this one particular excerpt, which is they're looking at Augustine and his understandings of the Manichaeans, and really, they say this should be read in all of Augustine's commentary should be read in conjunction with the testimony of Epiphanius of Salamis, who wrote about the Manichaeans and their eating habits. Epiphanius reports in the Panarion about the Manichaean elect as follows.
Before eating bread, they say this prayer formula to the bread. It was not I who reaped you, threshed you, ground you, or baked you, but another did all this and brought you to me. I eat you without guilt. After saying this prayer for himself, he says to the catechumen, I have prayed for you. And then the latter leaves. In fact, as I explained to you a little while ago, if someone reaps, he will be reaped. If he throws wheat into a grindstone, so he too will be thrown into it. If he has kneaded, he will be kneaded. If he has baked bread, he will be baked. This is why any work is forbidden to them.
This is exactly what my cat's attitude towards me is.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, if you need me, I will need you.
He will be baked soon.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Oh my God.
I do think this is really illustrative though of that point of like the deep relationship of the bread as a microcosm or an image or identified with the physical body, and the wheat and grain itself undergoing some of the same processes that the human the human does. That's so clinical, but like the
He will be baked soon,
yeah,
alhamdulillah.
soon in hell, according to Augustine.
Hmm.
Yeah, really, like the being able to mirror each of these acts of the body, and why it must be prohibited, not because it's particularly bad, but because it's effective.
Hmm. Yeah. This was just a funny part to me,
Mhm.
this idea that like, oh, they're like saying to the bread all the time, like, don't worry, it wasn't me who processed you and made you into this, but like so don't be cursing me for eating you, which I think is as you were saying, it's just a great like encapsulation of that particular attitude of like the relationship. You know, we often say like, oh, it's not I who does this, who curses you,
Mhm.
who cuts this animal's throat. It's rather the knife, or it's rather it's this particular saint, or it's somebody else, or it's King Solomon, right? And so interestingly, you know, Augustine says that the Manichaeans also rejected eggs, milk, and wine. And eggs were spurned specifically, or you know, or at least not consumed very often, not because of reproduction, but because they would cease to live when opened. Um, and he says that there's not necessarily a coherent explanation for the rejection of milk, but you know, as it was drawn from a living being, but the dairy products could also be potentially linked to like procreation. Um, because of, you know, milking fertile animals. And so, you know, his hypothesis was that this was likely because the Manichaeans wanted to reject you know, perpetuating this imprisonment, this like Gnostic imprisonment of like, if matter is to be rejected, then we should, you know, not allow continued procreation. But also milk, like we should do a milk episode. We should just we should just a got milk episode. But like it is deeply related to female procreation, and it's considered across many different cultural attitudes to be somewhat a menstrual blood, of course, as well. So that could be one particular answer. So, you know, there's in Augustine's critiques of the Manichaeans, you know, this actually comes up as a way that they're seen as kooky, right? Like this is kind of like this is odd and kind of almost silly that they do these kinds of things. But like I just love the idea that like the bread is a little microcosm, right? In fact, so,
Mhm.
especially unflavored bread that's not spiced, or you know, different fruits and different things are not added to it. This is a bread is ultimately in magic a substitute for the primordial clay. And while not all cultures use bread in this way, and bread is not always or wheat is not always a staple grain, I do find from my studies that many. times you will encounter some kind of like the primary staple grain being a cipher for the primordial clay from which the gods made man. And so whether that's tapioca or
Hmm.
rice or barley, these kinds of things, or corn, it will be like, like man being made out of corn, for example, from maize, right? It's like this is the thing that you would use for magic because if you could liken it to that primordial clay, then you can liken it to anything. You can create the world out of it, you can also destroy the world out of it. And
Hmm.
so much of my training in Orthodox folk magic is bread based, and we'll talk about some Balkan examples later. But I just want to start us off with some examples from this book, Food Heresies and Magical Boundaries in the Middle Ages, because it's great. And listen, if we're talking
Hmm.
Augustine and we're talking his polemics, we have to talk about heretical bread. Specifically, the authors mentions the Cataphrygians, right, as well as the
Hmm.
Manichaeans. But the Cataphrygians were a little naughty.
They were freaks.
They were freaks, well, at least according to Augustine, because they made allegedly a bread made from flour that was mixed with infant's blood. Allegedly a 1-year-old baby. They would take little punctures around the body and mix that with the bread, which they would create a quote quasi-Eucharist. And look, drinking blood and ritual infanticide, notorious recurring accusations, as the authors note, already used by pagans against Christians because, like, what are you talking about? You eat your God? Like ridiculous. You guys are
Mhm.
cannibals. Very common pejorative against the Christians, but also easy to use against others, right? And so this idea of like,
Mhm.
um, the innocent blood of a 1-year-old child, we can liken that child to Christ. We can establish a kind of equivalency with the Eucharist. And it can also be made, basically like a perversion of the Eucharist as a kind of like foreigner attitude towards it, right? And interestingly, of course, this is the exact same accusation we see in the Middle Ages in anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish minorities, right? Who are already going to be
Mhm.
especially marginalized and you know, you like continually are going to be victimized with this and with also with violent reprisals and this kind of slander of like eating babies and so on. And it's also transfers into witch stereotypes as well, right? Which often many
Mhm.
of the European witch stereotypes are directly lifted off of anti-Semitic tropes too.
Mhm.
But like these naughty, naughty Cataphrygians, Augustine also says that actually the Manichaeans had a second kind of Eucharist as well, which was with mixed with human semen. And sometimes it was collected and kneaded by spreading flour under where women who had been sexually assaulted were. And so again, this is just another way to make it super scandalous, right? And he said that Augustine is thought to have personally witnessed the interrogation of people who confess to these things, but ultimately, like, it could be slander, it could be many things. But I wanted to note this notion of adding in semen to bread. Not, first of all, not purely a Thelema thing.
Mhm.
This is definitely the Thelemites, Gnostic cakes of light and all. This is actually quite an old tradition. And in fact, so much of bread magic, specifically in the part of Serbia where I'm from, has a lot to do with adding body fluids to breads for different kinds of rituals, especially milk, like so breast milk. Some breads have to be made from like a young mother and an older mother. Sometimes it has to include the breast milk of like a grandmother and a granddaughter, which like how do you get that? Like especially when someone has passed their lactation, in general is a question that is left to be debated. Although there are also, it's worth noting, there's many plants that carry names of mother's milk as well.
Mhm.
But and also blood is a substitute for milk as well. But it is interesting to note. I think just this kind of idea of like there's a part in the book where they later on talk about like what it is to bake bread in one's name as a ritual. So in the Middle
Mhm.
Ages, so like this idea that like okay, if you bake a bread in your own name and it rises very well and becomes thick and tall, this means that you're gonna have money, you're gonna have health, right? But this practice was punished because it was seen as magical, and there's an implication that it abandoned God, right? You reverted to pagan idolatry, right? And so instead, the penitent had to fast on bread and water or sometimes, with skim milk and cheese. And fasting can also obviously mean abstaining from wine and meat. You pointed out in your article on Cura Mundi, right, that
Mhm.
it's fasting by bread and water is specifically what the German text says for how to approach that spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, subsisting on the bread alone as much as it is exclusory of other more corrupting or odorous influences in the perception of spirits. There's a specific something for those who have done it or aspire to do it. There's a specific quality that comes just from living on the bread for a little while.
Yeah.
It's its
And this
own thing, its own form of
mm,
trance, if you will.
mhm. And this is all coming from, specifically the citation that I mentioned is coming from Burchard of Worms' corrector.
Hmm.
Because he's looking at a bunch of different magical practices in general, and a lot of them involve bread. And so he also makes mention of baking bread as a divination practice.
Hmm.
We mentioned this whole thing of like in one's name, right? And you see if it becomes thick and tall. That's a divination, right? You're seeing if it's going to succeed. And I've done this. Like I do think breaking bread in your own name, although maybe Burchard of Worms would be a hater of this practice, it is something that you could do. And I find that be careful with that though, because that bread now is also symbolic of your fortune. So don't let it like mold or rot or get
Hmm.
particularly like bad. Like I would eat the whole thing, really, and not necessarily let other people eat it with you. Like this is something that I would not share that because if it represents your health and your
Hmm.
wealth, you want to keep it with you. There's other ways to distribute blessings. There's other ways to share in blessings with other people, especially by having banquets. But like if you are making a doppelganger of yourself, if you're like baptizing it as you, I would not let other people consume of your body
Hmm. Yeah, don't create a an Augustin situation here
unless you were
of
to win the coin flip.
I love quasi Eucharist.
It's a good quote, yeah, quasi
Mm.
Eucharist.
Also
Um,
the just the as a brief aside, the name of the chapter of the book that this information is recorded, Pagan Counter Cuisine,
mm, mm,
is
mm.
fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great. Actually, this reference of baking bread as divination seems to be an original addition from Burchard. So,
Mhm.
the authors say it could be contemporary hearsay, it could be direct observation, but there are examples of bread in those kinds of contexts, right? So, for example,
Right.
Martin of Braga, writing in Galicia in the mid-6th century, noted the peasants of his time through bread in order to worship the quote-unquote devil, and this may have
Mhm.
been done to divine the future. Although, interestingly, he also notes they honored moths and mice as deities by putting bread and cloth in the chest for them to eat to ensure enough plenty for the coming year. Now, this could be a slanderous accusation too. It's important to note with a lot of these catalogs of magic. But I do love the idea of like here's cloth and here's bread so that the mice
Mhm.
and moths may multiply. That's very, very witchy to me.
It's
Whether or not it happened, I think you could definitely do that. If you have good pacts with those spirits and your name is not Key. Uh,
yeah, it's rather not it happened, just don't go looking in my chests.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it is really interesting though, the all of the mid fifth to seventh century accounts of this time, especially talking about a bit further afield, like Roman religion in general,
Hmm.
and especially in like Germania and like other territories where worship can be and was done through the baking of bread and sacrificing it either to lakes or trees. Based, good, do
Hmm.
that.
Totally. There's also a really interesting mention here, which was this notion of like bread used differently different times of the year. The author's note comes up in the Carolingian capitular dating to the end of the 8th century. So this is 790 to 800 in Italy. So there's this mention of a custom of breaking special bread which is made by suffogating the loaf with burning candles underneath it and during the winter solstice. And then people would make vows on this bread. And the capitular suggests that this custom may have implied an offering of this kind of bread, such that it could be replaced with a healthier and simpler offering of bread to the church. Which I think is fascinating too, because later on they talk about like a record left behind by papal legates in England about 2 centuries later, of the concern of like casting lots to settle
Hmm.
litigations. Um, it's more about like it's really more about like I don't want to settle litigations like that as opposed to just divination itself being the concern. But I do like I do like the idea of like this loaf that actually ends up becoming like an offering of the community health as well,
Hmm.
which is still very much a modern experience as well across the board. It's almost hard to like point out like which cultures don't do this,
Hmm.
especially in Europe. Another thing too that comes up was because in Bertrand of Worms's Corrector, bread specifically as a ritual implement is mentioned like 7 times as an essential element, right? There's also so many more things that could have happened that were symbolic, right? Where bread is just so obvious and assumed that it may not even be recorded. So, of course, we can't really mention this without also talking about funerary methods, and the authors do go over that quite a bit. Again, I recommend this book highly if folks are interested in knowing more. But bread and other foods were obviously used as offerings in non-Christian rituals all the time, right? This was one of the most like across the board important pagan sacrifices for any like wheat producing society. And so Richard talks about this question of bringing bread or other offerings or eating in different sacred places that are not churches as a potential way for sin to enter, right? Because you're having people gather and do these kinds of like quote unquote quasi-Eucharists to go back to Augustine. Because what is a Eucharist? It's a communion. It literally communes with the divine. So if you're consuming bread out there in nature with other things, you're communing with something else. So this idea that you eat food and then it imbues you with attributes of what you're eating, right? And if what you're eating is something needed in common with other kinds of spirits, then you might be committing some kind of heresy by doing this because you're now in communion with other beings that are not Christ.
Hmm.
Now, one thing that I gotta say is Bersher talks about this one particular uh a bread needed upon her vases, if you will, and sets up 5 years of penance for this transgression, which is like a severe harsh fast. Now, vases recalls the Latin vas, meaning dish, and is possibly a misspelling of natis, which is buttocks. So the authors say Burchard might interpret Vastus as natas and describes this recipe for an aphrodisiac bread, which women make by laying face down, and the others then knead bread on their naked buttocks, right? So like the woman is like the table, and someone else is kneading bread on their butts, and then they serve this bread to their husbands, who then their sexual desire for them is amplified. This slay, first of all.
Yeah.
Like this is go to the gym, build yourself a shelf, and have someone bake bread on it or knead bread on it because I mean that will do it. For all of our talk of straining, his coffee through your panties or whatever like that, that has your menstrual blood in it still, like that's another way to do it.
Bake them a whole meal.
Make him a whole meal, exactly. If you got a shelf, you can fit a lot on it, right? Um, which is really funny because the authors are like, oh, well, this seems to have no precedent at the time because usually the purpose is the opposite, which is baking bread to cause impotence instead. And this was made by having a woman rolled naked on a sheet scattered with grains of bread wheat. The woman in question has previously slathered her body with honey, which is another aphrodisiac, so the grains would stick to her. And then the bread is eventually produced from this flour made by rotating the millstone in the opposite direction of the sun. And so this idea being that, now you're causing impotence because even though you've gone through this kind of fertility ritual, you're actually grinding the millstone backwards against the sun. So it's actually gonna it reminds me a lot of like uh let's say you have like a pentacle, right? And you're doing some kind of magic for somebody, and the pentacle is for luxury, it's for wealth. Maybe it's the second pentacle of Venus, which is great for charm, right? And for glamour. But then you like nail someone's picture on it backwards. And you're basically saying, like, I'm not, instead of using a cursing pentacle or a cursing symbol, I'm actually using the one that grants this, but I'm putting you in opposite relation to it. And I
Mhm.
find that to be very effective, right? So for like, it's one thing to put someone upright on, let's say, I don't know, like the fourth pentacle of Jupiter. It's another thing to put them on backwards. Same thing with like a card or something else that presents like a really good a scene of something. It's one thing to put someone on the lover's card,
Hmm.
right? It's another thing to put them on backwards and put and have the other lover face away. It's for like a breakup, that kind of thing, or for any kind of like, whatever you have, you can reverse, right? So even plants that bring fertility, you can use them to curse fertility. Plants that bring money, you can use them to reverse money if you know what you're doing with them.
Hmm.
And in this case, I think it's a good mention too. It's just like even though you think like, okay, hold on, a woman covered in honey rolling on wheat, like that sounds like a really good aphrodisiac, fertility increasing bread spell, but actually it's the specific grinding counterclockwise against the sun that
Hmm.
reverses it instead.
Yeah. Going making fantastic fertility material, then destroying it as an act of ultimate infertility. It's
Exactly,
good.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
good shit.
The authors even say, look, that both cases involve the interplay of various elements. That's gender, right? The practitioners are women. There's nudity, and then there's the backwards path. So the bread which caused impotence was based on then two sources of sympathetic power, the naked body and then the backwards rotation of the grindstone relative to the motion of the sun.
Hmm. And even getting ahead of myself a little bit, but using burned pieces of bread for healing,
Mm,
specifically because you're denying nourishment to the illness that is upon the person.
yeah.
Um, Same idea.
hmm It's true. Uh, there's so much to talk about in this book. I'm just gonna briefly mention one other thing. There's a chapter they have. This is chapter 8, Niccolò da Poggibonsi. Uh, Bonsi Body.
Poki bonzi body.
Bonsi Body, yeah, and the magical bread of Bethlehem. And this is a fascinating chapter that's about Poggibonsi's Libro di Oltramare, which this guy is a Franciscan friar. He's talking about his pilgrimage to Bethlehem in the mid 14th century. And specifically, he goes around a few different holy places in the Middle East, but in this particular situation, he describes that when he's in Bethlehem, he sees a tradition allegedly associated with the Church of Nativity. So on Christmas Eve, he saw Christians making bread with water from a well located inside the basilica. And they believe this bread to be endowed with certain powers useful for pregnant women. So I thought this was absolutely fascinating because I mean this is something that I saw growing up even, right, with people making bread specifically on Jesus's birthday or specifically on Bogojavlenie. So that's I know English. That's Epiphany. There we go. Um, and so and these would have certain powers, especially for fertility and also for fecundity of wealth. Um, the different ones would be used for love, especially on Mladenci, sometimes on Sretenje, which is Old Candlemas, especially Đurđevdan on George's Day. Vidovdan too, right? Because you can use it for scrying, for seeing your lover in the future. But I do love the notion too that like where did the Star of Bethlehem actually go? Like once the wise men followed it, and they make mention in this particular chapter. Well, like Voltaire, and in 1777, wrote, well, maybe the star had just thrown itself into a well, right? Like that seems to be the common opinion. And this well is still shown to pilgrims who would have to descend into it to know the truth. And to this day, actually, guides to the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem still contain descriptions that, like, actually, it's in the well that the star actually fell. But there's ways to capture the star too in bread,
Mhm.
and that's something that we, Poggibonsi actually says that after spending 2 months at sea, he arrives in Cyprus. He set sail off Venice, and then later on he resumes his trip and he goes to Jerusalem. He spends Easter and the Assumption of Mary there, and then he celebrates Christmas and Epiphany. And throughout this voyage, he sees these different bread rituals that captivate him. He also describes like all kinds of like interesting like food things that he notices. But this particular one situation that he describes, right, is he dedicates 14 chapters to Bethlehem. And in these chapters, he gives a step-by-step account of the route to Jerusalem, including passing by the site of Rachel's tomb, and then finally gets to the Church of Nativity. And through descriptions of these rituals, he really fixates on this particular situation that happened with the bread, right? So finally, we get to the part where he's describing, this type of bread that's made without yeast, and it's prepared by mixing flour with water that was drawn from this well where the Star of Bethlehem rested. So this is, I love this, right? This is star bread. And this is what he describes.
Now, I wish to relate that on the night of the Nativity of Christ in this place, congregate all the generations of Christians, and each generation prepares its altar, and each generation celebrates in its own right, in its own tongue, so that it is a marvel to see so many people thus disguised in tongue and attire. And at night, all the people make their bread after this manner. They take pure flour and draw water from the cistern where the star above mentioned rested, and with this water mix the unleavened flour, and then knead bread, and this bread they deem to have great virtue.
I love this so much. Just the capacity, right, to like bread that you bake on Christmas Eve with water drawn from the well, right? You're creating basically a bread form of the star. So I really wanted to make note of this because when in the Gospel of John, when Christ claims to be the bread of life and also the living bread that came from heaven, he is identifying as bread, right? And then these Christians that Poggibonsi is describing clearly have this profound connection between Eucharist, this nativity, Bethlehem, the star, and when they eat this bread, the power of the star, could be transmuted to those who would consume them and have this great virtue, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
Poggibonsi was quite like he's quite fascinated by this ritual, and I personally just I could imagine like oh my God, the things you could do with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like it's eaten, right? He doesn't mention it being used in divination. Maybe it was, but like the central ritual is in consuming it.
Need that quasi Eucharist.
We're gonna keep saying that. Also, one other thing to note too is the testimony of Francesco Soriano, who was a 15th century Franciscan friar of Venetian origin who also spent a lot of time in the Middle East. He wrote a treatise of 51 short chapters describing very accurately different locations in the Holy Land. For a really cool reason, which is to satisfy the curiosity of his sister, who and other nuns that live in the Church of Saint Lucia in Foligno, which I think is just really interesting. Like his sister and the nuns of Saint Lucia really wanted to know what was going on in the Holy Land, and because they were all excellent remote viewers, they kind of figured it out. But then also, this brother went off to do it too. So he writes this treatise and he writes of various indulgences that came in Bethlehem, and he describes the church, right? And he also makes reference to this is where like the star of the Magi has fallen. But like Poggibonsi, he also attests to this practice of making bread in the cave. So it's not just a Poggibonsi thing. Like this is another citation of this exact same practice. However, there's two details that he adds to this practice. It's not just what we described before. He also says this was also performed by Muslim women, and that this bread is used by women during labor to ward off delivery pains. And I love this that he basically it's an evolution of this practice saying that like not only is it used additionally by Muslims, but it's also specifically to help ward off labor pains. So baking the bread in the place of nativity, he doesn't refer to the water from the well, nor to Christmas time, but he does say it has to be baked in the place of where the nativity happened. And of course, as Mary had a painless childbirth, according to tradition, right? You can imagine that this bread then would help as a symbol of the baby and as a symbol of the mother's health, help create a painless birth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit on this book. Really great text. Again, highly recommended, and it will be in the show notes. Another text I wanted to draw attention to briefly. This is Catherine Storm Hindley's Textual Magic, Charms, and Written Amulets in Medieval England. Her PhD thesis actually makes a beautiful reference to one of the key notes, speaking of bread magic, which is various medieval English charms that have to do with the paternoster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And specifically that they can be these words, are alone efficacious. And when it says where to write them, it's on bread or parchment, right? No words need to be spoken. It's just the power of the paternoster itself. So the ink that is then placed on the bread can be washed off and then placed into the water that chickens will drink, which will then heal them. And this is a very common technique. We've talked about it a few times on the podcast, right? The idea that, you would wash off ink off a vessel that then is then consumed. It can be done with edible ink, for example, in a porcelain cup, for if you want to do a healing charm that you didn't consume. I do think bread magic in general could be a good prologue to a later episode on consumption in magic, like eating words, eating the Bible, eating verses, um, writing a Quranic verse, and then drinking water out of it, which allows you to
Mhm.
consume it for blessings. So much of Muslim magic that I've been exposed to involves a lot of this kind of a consumption as well for healing. But here's an example, this particular notion of like runoff from the water that bathes the bread or the parchment, then, is later on consumed by chickens. And certainly by people, right? So there's an
Mhm.
additional, in addition to this charm to protect chickens, which, is extensively used as a motif in the book, there's plenty of other examples too, where you might create characters that you then add to the crusts of bread. For example, names of the Trinity onto communion wafers that you then consume as well,
Mhm.
or other such examples of this notion of give us our daily bread. Uh,
Especially with
mhm,
like the Seder Square as well being an
mhm,
innovation on this.
yeah.
Also doubly so with the esoteric Lord's Prayer encoding that it might be. But
Oh.
yeah, like the inscription of the Seder Square, or in some cases reduced down even just to one or more of the words from the acrostic. And
Mm,
then that would be broken up and consumed over that number of days, or in specific intervals for specific conditions.
mhm,
Yeah, and this technique is discussed at some length by, perennial favorite of the pod, Claude Lequeteau, especially in traditional magic spells for protection and healing and dictionary of ancient magic words and spells. Both fantastic and both fun to rely on for this. But there is the specific example of bread divination using this technique as well of breaking the bread up into seven small loaves or seven small pieces, or in other cases verses from the Pater Noster, different lines, different letters, and the patient should then be made to fast on this bread on that particular day that is selected until recovery is had,
mm,
um, which I find, interesting because they're just entirely empowering bread as like the exorcistic agent in some ways, or like the purgative agent, or just the thing that is going to starve out whatever this illness is. Same as was mentioned before, inscriptions of Seder Square with each individual letter or each word done in five pieces, or even other, magical words. Famously, there's a example included of abracadabra being written out syllable by syllable onto a piece of bread that is then given to the patient to eat.
mhm,
So, kind of similar logic too through the consumption. Not only are you imbibing and integrating the inherent magical power of whatever was done, you are also, in the case of the abracadabra, you reduce it by eating it away.
mhm,
And same with the Seder Square, or other evolutions of this technique, where as you consume piece by piece in the natural order of these things, or set up like a regimented fast where it's like, okay, I have 9 pieces of this over 9 days, I'm gonna have this, or I have, 7 pieces, I'm gonna have one each day of the week for that many weeks. By week 7, it's gonna be hard as a rock, but fuck it, we'll figure it out.
mhm, mhm.
Unless it's American bread, in which case they do some dark sorcery to it to keep it soft.
Right, so that my dad recently quit eating all bread because he
Mhm.
was like, "This is not what we had back home." Like he's like, "I'll eat it if it's from a bakery, but I can't do the supermarket bread anymore because it doesn't it it does not get hard in 3 days. It is like full of all kinds of dark juju." I was gonna say like five different things. I'm just gonna hesitate and not say any
Mhm.
of them because it will end up becoming an
Yeah.
incredibly elaborate European ship post that you probably all saw coming. So I'm gonna restrain myself.
Mhm. But speaking of the edibility of bread, one technique that I love, especially for its inclusion in Egyptian Secrets of Albertus Magus,
Hmm.
and by extension, someone who was working that text, including it in Hyatt, which shout outs.
Hmm.
But bread is a divination tool of does it remain edible to man or beast? Um, there's a technique that is to ascertain whether a sick person will die or not, which you take a piece of bread and you put it on the sick person. I've seen, you put it on their brow, or you put it in front of their mouth, or you rub it up against their teeth, or to, classic to the afflicted part. And
Hmm.
then you throw it before a dog, in most cases, or another animal. And if the animal eats the bread, the patient is destined to recover. And if the animal rejects it, the sick person is destined to remain so, um, which I find is a nice technique dealing again with edibility and its ability not just to be a magical item unto itself, but a sponge of other magic and other conditions, and to be able to capture these different spirits and energies and whatever illnesses might be in people to take it away from
Hmm.
them.
Totally.
Similarly, using bread as like a talisman unto itself, like dry out bread, hang it above the door, and that keeps fights away in the house, which always great.
Yeah, no fights in the house.
Mhm.
That's what I tell my spirits at least. I do that scene from like Peaky Blinders. Where like Tommy Shelby's going like, no fighting,
Mhm.
no fighting, no fighting, no fucking fighting. It's me to my ghosts, my spirits.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, there are some, other techniques that bear mentioning specifically, using the bread as kind of the substitute, the representative for anything that might be unknown to you or known but requiring of a body. So this is for St. Anthony's fire, which is an inflammatory condition of the skin.
Mm.
And it is, in my opinion, the hottest oral charm in the entire corpus of Albertus Magus,
Oh
uh,
shit.
which is I strolled through a red forest, and in the red forest there was a red church, and in the red church there stood a red altar, and upon the red altar there lay a red knife. You take the red knife and you cut the red bread,
That's pretty hot.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you repeat that three times, and even without the physical object of the bread, even its invocation here of cutting it as the representative body of whatever problem needs to be solved. I'm sure you can imagine how this innovates
Hmm.
with that charm, as well as a bunch of other charms for theft, charms for um, locating the body of a thief that may be unknown to you. The simplest variation of this being, recorded by Hyatt as entry 8,475 in folklore from Adams County, Illinois, for you nerds out there. Much like myself. So, if someone steals from you the next morning, go and burn a piece of bread to black and throw it away. And whoever took anything from you won't be able to keep it. It will come back. So this is both being the body of the person or the item itself, and its usefulness to that other person, depending on how nasty you want to get with it. And as well, the fantastic include from Egyptian Secrets that was noted by Hyatt to be a written contribution that was sent it to him, which
Mm.
hilarious. So it's you take 3 pinches of bread, 3 pinches of salt, and 3 small portions of lard. You make 3 packages, and in each package you put one of each of these things. So one bread, one salt, one lard.
Hmm. Those should have
And
been our names. You know how like
yeah.
Salt wanted us to be like Salt, Sulfur, Mercury? Yeah,
Mhm.
we should have been Salt, Bread, and Lard.
Yeah. Be like salt bread and coin,
That's true.
classico style. Always be
Classico.
fortuitous in that way. Um,
Classico.
but yeah, so when you make these packages, you make a strong fire and you put each of these packages in the fire and you say, I lay for the thief bread, salt, and lard upon the flame, for thy sin is hard. I lay it upon thy lung, liver, and heart, that thou may feel a bitter smart. It shall come upon thee need and dread as it approaches dire death. All veins shall in thy body burst and cause thee pain and quenchless thirst, that thou shalt have no peace or rest till all that thou hast returned in place where thou hast taken the plunder, or be caught by lightning and thunder.
For thy sin is hard.
Mhm.
That goes hard.
Oh man, dentist is a real one because you said I grind hard in my sleep. So yeah, seeing here the bread as the representative body and representative fruit of the labor of the thief.
hmm That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, totally. Always fun ones. Similarly to bread is a pretty fantastic physical item. My favorite in Albertus Magus is as a cure for a wound.
Mm.
You chew up a bunch of bread and mix it with brandy, and then you just pack that into the wound. I don't recommend doing this, but in a pinch, I guess.
hmm
But another this is from like a toe to treat a horse injured by a nail. To treat a horse hurt by a smith's nail, you take a piece of white bread and the herb that is called misery, which I love,
hmm
but this is spiderwort in other names. You blend them together and you give the mixture to the horse 2 or 3 times and it will recover. Um, there is also a nice prayer that accompanies it, which is Ah, sweet Lord Jesus Christ, as true as your Father and Son and Holy Ghost, three persons in one God. And as you give chaplains the virtue of making flesh and blood from wheat bread, and as true as you suffered from grave wounds in your flesh and your blood on the cross by iron nails to save the sinners, and as true as you have been given the powers to stones, herbs, and words, give this power to this bread and to this herb so that they may heal without delay the nail cursed hurt of this animal in the honor of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Just want to flag this one because it is invoking the power to do transubstantiation
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
as a meta historiola, I guess. Um, and that is like, hey, by the power of transubstantiation, transubstantiate this shit.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, good shit.
I fuck with that.
Totally, yeah. And of course, a bunch of others, divination. I don't recommend doing this one. In fact, don't do this one because it don't fuck the environment this badly. I guess unless it's an emergency, which in this case it would be, but don't. But if you do, don't. It's to locate a drowned person. You put some quicksilver on the middle of a slice of bread and you let the bread rest on the water where the person went down. And the bread and the quicksilver will float and stop over the point of the submerged body.
Mm.
So I like this little bread boat
Bread boat.
that piloted by some mercury that you send out to go find the bloated corpse, I suppose.
And Mercury's restless, right? So it has to go
Yeah,
do it.
absolutely. So yeah, just kind of a fantastic menagerie of techniques, but really just mirroring like representative of either a body to be affected by magic, a container for that magic itself, or just the divination tool by which breaking it apart, you are able to do sortilege. You can pull lots of bread. I liked the earlier phrasing too of it's the trial of bread and cheese,
Mm-hmm.
which is a trial that I would like to accept. a wonderful dinner.
Key's like, I volunteer.
Yeah.
Mhm. There was quite a few references actually in the earlier book that we were going through all those passages from about like trials of bread and cheese as well. That's the Marashi and Tasca book, Food Heresies and Magical Boundaries in the Middle Ages. Check that book out for real. It's quite
Mhm.
excellent.
Yeah, for real, for real.
And check out Le Couteau as always,
Hmm.
and Hyatt. In terms of resources, people always be asking me for Balkan stuff. And I will write many a book one day, beyond my one little humble Haitian pamphlet. Um, but in terms of English language resources, I wanted to point folks to an excellent, short but very beautiful study called Sacred Language of the Vlach Bread by Paunis Durlic. This is a free PDF that you can download. It's a beautiful study conducted by Durlic, who really, he's not only the director of the museum in Majdanpek, he's also a Serbian ethnologist of specifically of Vlach origin. And it's a 25-year-long study of Pomona rituals in the form of a small monograph observed in 70 villages. So he's looking at 1,000 various ritual breads, where he's published a dozen out of these, as well as 30 photographs out of 30,000. So this small study, it really, could have been 1,000 times more replicated, right? And it's just massively extensive. And these are beautiful full color photos, in which he's looking at this understanding of Pomana as ritual, as this massive replication of various different breads, the creation of many breads to become the shape of a human body and repose facing east, the head being surrounded by breads relating to guardians from which, if they don't do this, the head, the body of this person who's being mourned cannot travel to the afterlife. Including different designs for breads to represent the sun and the moon and different accompanying spirits, a pulmona ritual with like baking 1,000+ breads, of in one example in the third picture they show a luxurious pulmona that you observe when you're still alive. So this is not a funerary tradition solely. This is also done to commemorate, celebrate, and luxuriate members of the family, for example, right? So you have and the number of breads also refers to rules that the person being honored has to fulfill, both in a religious and morphological sense. I'm just currently scanning for this PDF. It is tremendous. If you're looking at like just a detail of different kinds of breads that note like different like what kind of ovens are they baked in? What kind of body parts to the human being that they relate to? The head, for example, making sure it doesn't go astray, and making sure different spirits and deities protect it. Breads for the full moon, the new moon. Different kinds of like it's almost like Egyptian in some ways, where it shows like different levels to which this person, if it's a funerary one, for example, um, a bread that is shaped with scissors, for example, so that the scissors can cut the funeral shroud and free the dead person like a fetus from the womb, right? A chain bread, which helps connect heaven and earth and also assists them in, this kind of transmutation. A ladder bread, which helps them climb to heaven. A hand, which takes, them onto a swastika, which represents Lucifer or the light bearer, like Danica, which is our name as well in Serbian for the planet Venus. Allowing them to take them to a rake bread, which rakes them into the afterlife, which helps them sort through the primordial uncreatedness of the abyss. A spiral wind bread, which protects them from the ill winds, as well as gives them, the kind of condition to not get lost in the winds. And like, not only are just some of these breads photographed, but you can also see like this entire beautiful array of this, not just solely funerary tradition, but also greatly done for someone's funeral, of just individual breads that are baked by different people. So who bakes it? Where is it baked? What kind of fire is the one that lights the oven? What symbols are drawn on the bread, including like ones that help get the person to heaven. So each magical tool, like imagine an entire Solomonic array, right? Like imagine every tool that you could possibly make into Key of Solomon, but all of them are bread.
Mhm.
So creating, I mentioned many times, I think, on the podcast at this point, but possibly in the Q&A as well, a practice that I was taught, which is to do the entire Serbian Cyrillic alphabet in a square, in bread, and then you eat each individual square once a day. So you eat the whole alphabet, which helps you recover from like a really intense illness. And this bread may have to be made by different women at different ages, different kinds of breast milk can be combined, or it could just be the bread alone. Vlach bread rituals are even more like far and above more intense and beautiful, far and above more intense and just like beautifully arranged in a kind of cosmovision that can be done. Like things that I've been taught are like, are nowhere near the level of detail that you might see in Durlich's study. You have even breads that symbolize, with symbols that go into archangels, Mary, different deities and pre-Christian spirits and so on and so forth. He's one of our premier scholars of Flach studies, and even just his understanding of like the influence of the celestial body across the days and the different breads that are done for beauty, for money, for wealth, for the moon, for the North Pole, for different stars, like in stellar customs, for different fertility customs. Like it is breads that are composite breads. So like for example, on the 27th page, there's a really interesting one where just like a three-part bread that creates a head. Um, and each object sent to the deceased, from food to furniture, needs to be touched by hand, named, and then kissed, which allows them to be verified. And for sanitary reasons, Black women usually confine food kissing only to this symbolic kissing of the most important bread. But the idea is that each one it's not just produced, it's also named, it's consecrated, it's invoked. And this is to ensure that the bread actually does the function that it's made to do in the funerary ritual. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, and there is a lot of this, I do recommend checking out his study as well as generally his work, especially if you read Serbian or Vlach, if you happen to know it. It's quite tremendous. And for those who, I know I always get questions from people who, speak and read Serbian and Bosnian Croatian, this language family. Um, there was a great article called Хлеб od narodne magije Balkanskih Slovena, which just is bred in the folk magic of Balkan Slavs, which is tremendous. So much of what he writes in this article, it is available on the internet. The link will be in the show notes, but you could also just Google it. And you can Google Translate the article if you want, because it's not a PDF, like it's directly on a web page. It notes techniques of giving breads to evil spirits to actually tame them or to pacify them, especially in Georgian, using it as a tool, different kinds of days, including St. Ignatius's Day, St. Basil's Day, Christmas Eve, and so on. Muslim practices as well in Bosnia, Mladenica practices to protect someone from antisocial behavior, protecting your fertility of your marriage, sacrifices on St. Elijah's Day, for example, that then get incorporated into bread magic, because the blood of the rooster will be incorporated into the loaf as a cure against magic, as a retrograde charms and so on and so forth. It's a great article. I wanted to toss that one out there as well. And similarly, if you're interested in, I mean, so much of bread magic as well is great against the evil eye, because again, Evil Eye we will do an episode on it. I really want my good friend Jay Hamade to come on for it because they gave an excellent presentation at this year, 2025's Veritas Genie Symposium on the Evil Eye. I was actually drafting a very like long, intensely researched Evil Eye episode, and then I watched their presentation and was like, never mind, we got to do this one together because I want you to share what you shared as well. There was a great book in Serbian by Tihomir Đorđević, Zle oči u verovanju južnih Slovena. So that's the evil eye and the beliefs of the South Slavs, which gives a number of different practices of amulets, natural amulets, as well as Christian amulets, Muslim amulets, Solomonic quote-unquote amulets, which are mostly Jewish, of course, and amulets that come out of nature, meaning plants and animal amulets. And bread was one of the most commonly cited ones as as well, which can be incorporated with many other ingredients. But the function of it, or why it's such an important healing one, as we've seen before, time and time again, beyond the Eucharist, right, is that it rises, right? So again, sorry, Catholics, but like the yeast part is so critical to this, right? Because it actually like it rises, and therefore overcomes, right, the curse because it's a spreading of health. And my quip aside, I actually, again, I want to emphasize, I totally 100% think that the Catholic justification, which is also for of what is the sin, I think is 100% true because that's how you curse with bread too, right? It's the multiplication of sin. It's the multiplication of ills, right? It's the kind of in thoroughness to which, as we saw even before, right? Like a beautiful bread that can be made on this way, right? And then just the millstone turning the other way against the sun is enough to curse with it, right? And I think with Durlich's study on Pomona, you have this notion of like the sheer importance of creating this kind of purity aspect, right? And also the to the deceased, right? And incorporating this elaborate bread ritual that creates the ritual body of this deceased and their journey to the underworld, which is why I feel like we made it kind of full circle with the whole Egyptian notion. You can imagine how that's vulnerable, right? Just someone spitting a curse into one of those breads, right? Someone potentially putting some grave dirt that's from someone who died a horrible death or was murdered into one of those things could disturb the body of the deceased. And so that's why it's regulated
Hmm.
by the chief women who presided over this ritual because they can attest to purity and hence the seal and kiss, right? They can also verify and say, like, I take on, if there's a curse in this, I take on the burden for it. Like, I take on its direction and I protect the deceased from it because I'm certifying that I'm the one who is the master of ceremonies. And I love that. There's also I'm nerding out about it, but there's so many
Hmm.
great notions as well of the different kinds of half swastikas and swastikas in Vlach culture, which also extend to other forms of the kind of curled swastika, very similar to the Basque laburu, which we see across Serbian and Croatian designs for Easter eggs as well. So you'll see those particular designs of like the serpent kind of cross, and it's related to the movement of angels and the movement of different familiar spirits who guide the person who is welcomed at Heaven's Gate by the Holy Mother, and then takes them up into uh into different, using the ladder, this kind of crisscross design on the breads into heaven, which even Durlich himself notes literally Set and Horus fighting in ancient Egypt. And they had ladders personally held that personally held them for the deceased, right? To allow them to kind of venture into their work. So yeah, I love it. I lots of possibilities for looking into this kind of work, especially for all my Balkan nerds out there who I know are asking for possible resources. So those are just a couple that I think are there. Citations alone will take you a great many distances if you know your way around the language.
Get that bread.
Get that get that bread. What a saying too, right? Like
Yeah.
even just like as a meme, but like it's so important to be like what it is to secure the bag, get that bread, right? And like what are we doing if not actually like securing our health and our wealth and our capacity to live another day?
Hmm.
Because
Lamenting our return to peasant-like conditions where we're subsisting on bread. Let's go.
let's go. And because it's Dudulic and because he's very thorough, he does even provide a table of different symbols collected from Da Vinci culture, which notoriously was
Mhm.
found in modern day Serbia from the 6th to 4th millennium BC, right when Europe is getting out of the Stone Age into the Metal Age. And these symbols, which are now known as the Vinci alphabet, uh, he actually he notes which ones can be found on the Vlach breads, and he highlights them in yellow on page 47. And I just love that because some of those I've seen even on plenty of non-Vlach breads as well, like including in our Easter eggs and on the bread kind of patterns that we use in Slavski Kolac traditions, depending on which part of Serbia you're from, and certainly different parts of Bulgaria and Macedonia and Croatia and Bosnia as well. Um, but this is Dulwich has a really cute quote in English that says, "No doubt some of these gods are still alive and immersed in the afterlife of the Vlach pantheon," which was is also very well preserved. He means referring to Da Vinci, and I have so many from my own mentors and their hypotheses about Da Vinci culture deities. I have so many theories as to certain things that carried over into Dodala, into Blaga Maria, Dodala, into Ogina Maria, into Ogina in general, into Perunkas, into Shumska and Gorska Majka, the Babas, Baba Quarisma, Baba Lent, Baba Roga, and all the rest. But another time, another book, another discussion, perhaps. But to end off, I actually wanted to start with the beginning of Drulich's study. He gives a citation from an ethnologist's field diary where he's referring to somebody he interviewed personally, and I just love this quote. And Key, I'm gonna have you read it with me. I'll do the regular text. You can do the italics. I just love this particular notion of somebody who is describing a conversation they have with bread. Like the bread itself gives them the wisdom that is being dispensed here. And they say, "Bread told me."
I am not food for the hungry or a redemption offering, nothing of the kind. I am a living language of old gods which man spoke at a time when he was close to God, when everyone who spoke the language could become God himself.
Bread told me this as well.
As food, I last but one moment, but as a sign, I last forever, as hope in life eternal.
It was then that I understood the words of Jesus Christ.
Take it and eat. This is my body. I am the bread of life. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Take it and eat it. This is my body.
And I just love that. I always love oral terms or citations where someone like is the implement that is talking. Like there's
Mhm.
some notable there's an oral term that I was taught in Serbian that actually speaks from the perspective of the garlic specifically, and it's Ti mene čuvaj od nokta, a ja ću tebe od svakoga zla. So it's you protect me from fingernails, I'll protect you from all evil. And what this is really a notion that like you don't peel, like the garlic is not peeled by fingernails. Like you make sure that it's only the pads of your fingers which are actually doing this. So like you protect me from your fingernails so that the actual paper that protects the garlic is not disturbed by something sharp. And then in that case, I'll protect you from evil. So garlic peel specifically that was not peeled by fingernails is an incredible is an ingredient that we use in a lot of protective charms against the evil eye and against vampires, for example. And I love that.
Mhm.
Right. I love a good charm that speaks to you as the actual implement. And so this
Yeah,
one I just thought was really sweet, which was, this notion of bread itself teaching you about magic and about life and the afterlife and all the rest.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, this was fun. Again, a little intimidating to this topic because I just feel like this every example we used, we could have swapped for a completely different one and then
Mhm.
done the episode maybe like 8 times over and it still wouldn't be enough. But it's a start. And go out, get that bread, uh, put, the breast milk, the rooster blood, the everything, whatever you need, not the mercury, but put it all in there. Capture the Star of Bethlehem itself and put it in there.
Mhm.
Which just makes me think, guys, just go get the water that they sell as a touristic thing and bake bread with it on Epiphany or on the Nativity and just have a good time.
Very real.
Yeah. I mean, I know gathering it on the day is part of it. But
Mhm.
goddamn if that isn't a cool technique. Star bread. There are, you know what? I maybe shouldn't blab about it too much. One of the things that I was trained to do was to make bread for different stars, right? Because
Mhm.
you capture water by making sure that this water is exposed to the star when it's actually at its rise. Cover it, make sure that the star doesn't get, seen, and then you use that bread as the water, as use that water, excuse me, in the bread formula as to make the yeast rise, which makes the star rise again because it rose that day on the heliacal. La 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 la. Star bread. Go out, go out and make it. It's as good as gold.
Mhm.
It's quite the talisman, if you will, if the astromages won't assassinate me for saying it. Um, don't attack me. I don't claim to be an astrological magician. I'm just a witch. I just do my little thing. I just do my folk magic. But it's good shit.
Mhm.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. A lot of the powders that I have, when I say like, oh, it's like a Vulcan folk magic powder for a star, it starts with breadcrumbs from that.
Mhm.
In case folks were wondering. There's lots of other things that go to it too, but that's a main that's a start. Bread is
Uh,
the start and it is the end and it is the alpha and it is the omega.
rises, falls, rise again.
Just like me. Because I'm always getting that bread buttered on both sides to
Butter,
make the heads and tails equal chance.
butter, my bread.
No. I don't even know what the I don't, you know like the Jeff Goldblum, the Carsus was stupid, but at least it made sense. This one doesn't really make sense.
I think that's the best part, you know.
Yeah, that's fair. The best part is also the Akashic Records. Um, Mine is Bread and Cheese by the Hallucination featuring Black Bear. Check out Hallucination in general. Absolutely fire flames. I
Mhm.
mean, how many times have I just put all their tracks on loop at this point? They're formerly a Tribe Called Red. They're a Canadian electronic music group. Really, really great. First Nations music, mixed with dubstep, hip hop, Moombaton. I know you love Moombaton.
Mhm. Oh God, yeah, the Moombahton story.
Hmm. But like contemporary powwow music, First Nations dance club, EDM music, it's crazy. It's great.
Mhm. Also, the hallucination is such a fucking good name change for that.
Yeah, 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 legit.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yours is the
think
worst one yet, by the way.
it's the best one.
No, I think out of all
That's
the categories, this one's the worst.
butter side up, and it's the best. Butter side down, and it's the worst.
That's fair. That's fair. We leave it to you
Of
to
bread.
decide.
Um, no, this is an equally nonsensical to the running No Country for Old Men gag today, but I think, you know, the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Which is Young Skirts McDonald's. So you know that you know that.
Can't even finish the joke. The joke, the punchline is any lyric. Like literally flip your coin, your No Country for Old Men coin. Flip your chest, it's a coin. I didn't even mention chess it's a magic. No, I did. I just said don't lose it, but you know, it can be used in so much. But like flip that coin and based on a incredibly complicated, borderline like PGM Homeric Oracle style divination system of lots based on Young Skirt's McDonald's lyrics, you will have your answer of what it was gonna be, like what the punchline was. It will be any of those lines.
You know that I fuck on the back of McDonald's.
You can't. God.
I'm pop singer, just like I'm Madonna.
Javier Bardem is Young Skirt. I'm I'm just fucking goofing y'all. The name of the freaking album too.
Oh man. So
It's
to exercise us of this joke, our part today is the Lord's Prayer.
if you didn't see this one coming, come on. It's obviously Lord's Prayer. Go cleanse yourself.
Oh man. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us for our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Polky Boncy. There we go.
Polky Boncy Body.
Okay, yeah, one more time. This is chapter 8, Nicola da Polka Bon. Well, I cannot.